So much brilliance on this panel. And yes, as you were saying, the Gina Davis Institute and Moms First released this report, and my husband and I, our foundation, the Archwell Foundation.
First commercial break.
Oftentimes as women, you may agree with this, the way that we see ourselves is reflected back to us. Sometimes accurately and sometimes, much to our disservice, inaccurately in what we see in media.
Meghan uses the pronoun we, associating with the audience, which makes it look like she's not alone in thinking this. This way, she can presuppose shared knowledge about these shared and lived experiences, even though this knowledge doesn't necessarily exist outside of her rhetoric. And which experiences? That remains a mystery. Meghan's actually talking about herself, how she thinks she's portrayed inaccurately, but disguises it as a general problem. Thus, the rhetoric of Meghan and like-minded celebrities and politicians is actually not individually freeing or empowering, because it's designed to keep people in that place, inside the group. That's exactly why they monopolize terms like inclusion, empowerment, and freedom before the opposing side accuses them of being proponents of the opposite.
But I think we can all agree that representation matters. And, you know, the key thing that I think needs to be focused on in terms of equity is that it's not a zero-sum game. Just because someone else has the same advantage that you do doesn't mean that you're losing anything. And it actually creates an environment that is so fair, but also inclusive.
The irony in Meghan's argumentation is that it hinges on the hidden and subjective presupposition that certain groups of people are more privileged than others, while she's literally implying that she's fine with giving privileges to other groups of people. Equity means providing someone with what they need to succeed and is tied to equality of outcome, whereas equality in the original and fair sense of the word means equal opportunities. So unlike what Meghan claims, the privileged people will lose something, which kind of shows that they weren't privileged at all. But at least Meghan got to say inclusive, struggling to find the right buzzword.
Fair, but also inclusive.
An environment that focuses on people's innate characteristics first and foremost, and not their talent and merits. What's not to like? Exclusivity masked as inclusivity.
What I find the most disturbing, frankly, especially as a supporter of women, is how much of the hate is women completely spewing that to other women. And I cannot make sense of that.
The reason why she acts as if she can't make sense of that is because she wants people to think about themselves as group members so that they don't criticize her. This exposes the self-serving motives behind groupthink-based rhetoric. The idea that you shouldn't criticize anyone who shares your innate characteristics is absurd. But then again, she doesn't call it criticism. No, it's all hate in Meghan's fairy tale. Again, she's actually talking about her own situation, but she disguises it as a general problem. Turns out inclusion is only good when it favors Meghan's narrative. Who would have thought?
Fair, but also inclusive, because I understand that there are certain platforms. Look, today's a really good example. This is being streamed on one of those platforms, and it's also fantastic because people are going to have access to hear all of this brilliance and all of this insight.
Flattery doesn't get more authentic than this.
There are a lot of women that are at the highest level, executive level, who are great champions of women, who are great philanthropists, and they are working in these spaces, and yet they're allowing this kind of behavior to run rampant. And at a certain point, they have got to put the do's behind the says and really make some changes on a systemic level. And then,
in other words, content that Meghan approves of is great. Content that she doesn't approve of is bad. And as we see next, she also has some authoritarian ideas on how to stop unwanted content. This rhetoric is aimed at controlling what other members of the group say and do, thus devaluing the independence of each individual in the very demographics she pretends to advocate for the independence of. Meghan continues to speak on her own behalf, pretending to speak on behalf of the community she's desperately trying to constitute.
You know, on the flip side of that, we have a responsibility in all of that. The systemic change has to happen at the same time as the cultural change is happening, because if you're reading something terrible, terrible about a woman, why are you sharing it with your friends? Why are you choosing to put that out in the world?
Maybe because it's true, because everything isn't simply hate, no matter how much you want it to be. Maybe because innate characteristics don't determine whether or not you can criticize someone. Maybe because people have ears and know manipulation when they hear it.
Women especially, well, all people, you want to feel seen and you want to feel heard. And community is a huge, vital piece of that, because when you're part of a collective and you feel as though someone is seeing you, really listening to what you have to say, at a certain point you feel empowered when you don't feel alone, right?
Just like she's been using associating rhetoric to make it look like she isn't alone in thinking this. The irony of talking about feeling seen and heard and empowered in a community that only sees and hears opinions that align with theirs.
And so the collective of all of us working together, understanding the shared goal that is in the best interest of our shared humanity, is just key. You can't do it by yourself, and I don't think you want to.
Translation time. The shared goal is to silence the voices, to use similar empty rhetoric that go against the group's voice. Real equality. Equity.
But social media is not going away, and look, I think by design, there was an entry point that's supposed to be positive and creating community, and something has devolved.
When terms like positive and devolved are used, it's not the terms themselves that are interesting. What's interesting is how the speaker defines them. The way Meghan defines positive and devolved might be and is probably quite different from many other people's individual definitions of the terms. Next, Meghan talks about solutions without giving solutions.
So for us, it's just, what is the solution? What can we do behind the scenes? What do we continue to do behind the scenes? How can we work with professionals and experts to really figure out, in knowing this is not going away, how do we make it safer, better, more positive?
So what are they doing behind the scenes? What are they talking to these professionals about? What do adjectives like better and positive mean?
When the car was first invented, there wasn't a seatbelt. You could smoke inside of your car. And what happened? People started to get hurt. People started to die. So you started to change the car. You would put in safeguards. And so as we watch the evolution of social media and the internet, what are those same modifications we need to make? Because people are getting hurt.
That's not the same at all. In car accidents, there are the same risks for all people, and thus all people have the same need for the same kind of safety. Online, however, we're not all at risk because we don't react the same to the same kind of content. So when people get hurt by something, we should ban the content. Is that it? Good luck agreeing with people about that. It sounds like such a nice, free society.
What do you think what does a healthy social media environment look like to you in the future when you think about this work that your foundation is doing?
To be honest, I don't know. As a dad, I don't know. As a human, I'm not sure. I think social media is going to evolve in different shapes and sizes as time goes on. AI is the new thing.
How can he find a solution when he doesn't even know what the goal is?
To be honest,
And the more information we have, the more information gathering we're able to do, the more we can have these high-level conversations and try to move the needle a little bit.
But that's the thing. What do these high-level conversations actually result in? What is the information they're gathering? And who are they gathering it for? Everything sounds great until you start asking people for definitions. Then the house of cards collapses.
And in that, I think so much of it can come down to, if someone is looking for something, please don't feed them the thing that they're not looking for that's going to harm them. The algorithms are very powerful.
Sure thing. I'm sure that big companies will get right on it, especially considering how they're able to predict exactly what their users aren't looking for and what will harm them, because Meghan and Harry have made such precise definitions of what they propose instead.
To be honest, I don't know.
In most cases, with content that's legal, obviously, what's to be considered harmful content is completely dependent on what each individual finds harmful and thus should avoid for their own well-being.
The algorithms are very powerful, but I am confident that with more ears and, as my husband said, awareness and visibility on what is really happening, that we can make some significant change together.
Well, we're very lucky to get the visibility of you guys. put your attention to this, it's going to be immeasurably impactful.
Meghan ends with this appeal to a community which doesn't exist since people have vastly different interpretation of what constitutes harmful content.
Why is it culturally we are equipping girls and women to think that if you are ambitious, there's something negative about that word?
Meghan focuses on what's useful for her agenda, to come up with excuses and wishful thinking as to why the world hasn't embraced her the way she had planned. From Meghan's underappreciated podcast, we know that ambition is a go-to word. She says she didn't feel the negative connotation behind the word until she started dating her now husband. That's Harry, I'm guessing. Thus, it's no coincidence that Meghan uses the word in this interview as well. She uses it as if she speaks for all women. But knowing what we know from the podcast, we can deduce that she's actually talking about herself.
Well, but also to be able on those platforms to have some way where you are incentivized to promote things, as you're saying, Melody, that are positive and good and true.
Under the guise of speaking for all women, Meghan's emphasis on true speaks to the articles and videos that have been written and made about her and the world's most famous bear.
To see this institutional gaslighting, they were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Positive and good and true.
Positive and good. According to whom? According to which definition? Meghan's. This is subjective language because when you analyze what's going on around the world, it's not going to be all positive, far from it. With Meghan's recommendation, people could get away with all sorts of things without being called out for it, because we wouldn't want to do anything negative. So no, Meghan can't assume agreement.
Positive and good and true, right?
Even if she only has positive things to say.
Did you make Kate cry?
No. The reverse happened. A few days before the wedding, she was upset about something. It made me cry. And it really hurt my feelings.
Okay.
And I've forgiven her, right? Mm-hmm. Right?
Next, Meghan reveals that she doesn't exactly think highly of the average internet user.
Then without question, you are perpetuating a cycle, especially in the entire period of lockdown, right? Lockdown, let's say someone before that had, I don't know, 5 hours a week that they could invest in just scrolling online. During lockdown and the absence of being out of the house or being at work, maybe you're spending 50 hours online. And you're becoming indoctrinated. You're becoming conditioned to be cruel. Conditioned to be cruel.
Yes, because we can't have people freely scrolling online. What if they happen to stumble upon content that doesn't praise this authentic and organic duo? It doesn't sound like Meghan has a problem with the indoctrination part, but that she wants to control what people are being indoctrinated with.
But if the shareholders of these companies can accept that they're going to get a little less profit out of it to make it a safe space, then that would stop the suffering.
What profit and what content? And how will less profit automatically stop the suffering online? What suffering and to whom? What Harry calls a safe space might be a quite scary place for someone who doesn't believe in censorship or the term safe space. All people will inevitably stumble upon content that hurts them, no matter how many safe spaces you make.
And there has to be responsibility that lands somewhere, and that must be with the platforms, with some,
Responsibility? Yes, because Meghan and Harry shouldn't be the ones taking responsibility for, I don't know, the many interviews they've freely participated in. Interviews that expose a prominent sense of entitlement, an entitlement you aren't allowed to point out because that's negative.
But even down to like the national anthem. No one thought to say, oh, you're American, you're not going to know that. That's me late at night Googling, what's the national, I've got to learn this.
Meghan and Harry have financial interests in keeping their narrative alive, using the very same platforms they can't stop criticizing. When it's positive attention, these platforms are good. When it's negative, they're bad. But that's the thing, we don't live in a world with only positive news. We live in a world where duchesses complain about having at least 2 years to Google the lyrics to a song and only expect sympathetic reactions. If you're not sympathetic, you're against their ambitions.
But do you think there's a way to harness social media in some way to actually help with these issues we're talking about now in terms of this issue of parity and some of the issues that you've been talking about, whether it be paid family leave or anything else?
What a euphemism like harness actually hints at is censoring certain comments. Who is indeed the arbiter of what content should be harnessed? People like Meghan. It appears so, because next she goes on to talk about strong changes, mimicking the interviewer's verb, harness.
You know, I think that there are ways to make strong changes on social media platforms and with the media in general, but people have to be brave enough to do it. In terms of parity, I think, you know, right now the demonization that you're talking about for women if they're being called ambitious.
The demonization they still haven't substantiated, but let's not let a detail like that get in the way of this important conversation. Not only social media platforms, but also media in general. Yes, it totally sounds like Meghan wants what's best for the common good, and not just for her and her now husband.
But people have to be brave enough to do it.
That doesn't sound manipulative at all.
One of the things that seems like such an easy solve from my lens, and we talked to some friends about this as well, you look at Instagram, for example, there's a like button or there's comments. So you have to, if you disagree with it, comment in a really vitriolic way. As opposed to if there was just a dislike button, wouldn't that hugely shift what you were putting out there? Because you could just like it or dislike it. Now, you either like it or you have to say something negative.
What's interesting about this is that Meghan doesn't reflect on what makes people comment negatively. She doesn't point the finger at the people who say things that make people react, and she couldn't dream of pointing the finger at herself. However, saying that certain comments are negative doesn't negate the potential truth value of these comments. Negativity is important for criticism and to speak truth to power. No one says that you have to comment in a
vitriolic way.
That's Meghan's interpretation of the negative comments coming her way.
And it's just adding to this really unfortunate cycle that is, that I think is having a ripple effect on women across the board.
Meghan keeps acting like she's speaking on behalf of a collective. It speaks volumes about modern journalism, so-called, that she gets away with this without a hint of critical counter-questions. But I guess this is Meghan's definition of positive journalism, positive reporting. The kind that favors her and like-minded celebrities and negates critical thought and unites the world in senseless cheering. How's that for a safe space? Ironically, this interview is proof that a critical press and critical commentaries are needed. Because if a positive-only mentality wins, celebrities and politicians will be able to control the agenda with emotional and logically inconsistent arguments.
And this week the world is watching as you cement your place in history by showcasing the good that you are doing today, in the present moment, as we embrace the moment of now to create a better tomorrow.
This beautiful woman just sort of literally tripped and fell into my life. She's capable of anything.